Welcome to the Radical Intimacies podcast series by Memefest. I'm Oliver Vodeb, a sociologist looking closely at design and communication, co-founder of Memefest, and editor and curator of the Radical Intimacies, Designing Non-Extractive Relationalities book. In this podcast, I will be in conversation with the authors who contributed to the book, many of whom I've known for years as collaborators and friends. The book was published in 2023 by independent academic publisher Intellect. The book explores resistance to capitalist domination through design, focusing on dialogue, power, land, interventions, and radical praxis. It presents the concept of radical intimacies, a relational way of designing that fosters closeness and decolonizes knowledge and the public sphere. In this series, we'll dive into these ideas, discussing and expanding them, and creating spaces for deep, meaningful exchange in the undercurrents. Let's see what happens. In our second podcast, I had the pleasure to be in conversation with my friend, Mariano Mussi. Mariano Mussi is from the southmost tooth of the American continent, which they describe as a land as vast as our loneliness. Mussi taught philosophy of science at the National University of Rosario and is now a medical epidemiologist and a family physician, working in a public hospital whilst also advising union struggles in the cities and jungles of many Latin American countries. Mariano has contributed a chapter with the title The Emancipatory Design of Suffering. You are invited to read the full chapter in the Radical Intimacies book. For now, I wish you to enjoy our conversation. And I've learned a lot. And when I was reading it, there was one sentence which I thought I would like to use for the opening, and it says, it's a beautiful sentence, and it says, each new experience of suffering is an opportunity for social transformation.
Yeah.
And I wanted to just say this for the start.
Yes. I am a physician. I'm a general practitioner.
Yes.
And in some time of my life, I felt, I feel bad about my work. I didn't understand what actually I had to do with my work in order to make something different from, treat disease.
Yes.
To diagnose disease, and I start thinking about what is the clinical work, what is actually this work of hearing and touching and speak with people who experience the suffering. So I start to think about the suffering itself, and I realize that the physicians, the health activities are all oriented about the disease.
Yes.
And I start thinking about this, difference between the disease and the experience of suffering. The experience of suffering is an ontological way of being. It is something that is, untouchable, ineffable. We only have an indirect way to make contact with that experience.
Yes.
And it demands us as health workers, it demands us an effort of creation. We have to create new things in order to to cure, to
Yes.
not only to treat a disease, but to cure.
Yes.
And I start thinking that there's a lot more in the experience of suffering that it could be found in the concept of disease. Um, Actually, the disease is not longer is not belonging to the health workers. No, the
Yes.
disease. It represents something that is very common in capitalism, that is the division between knowing and doing.
Yes.
Actually, the health worker, we only do things. We only do things with the concepts and the constructions that the academia and the great, research institutions say we must do with the patient. And the world, the reality is richer than that.
Yes.
And the experience of suffering is all. It goes beyond the disease as an instrument to fix people, but is to work in suffering as an opportunity for revolution.
Yes.
The suffering expressed is needed, radical needed, and it's like we have always suffered, shaped by the word of others.
Yes. Yes.
Uh,
To me, what was really new was you bridging, many different disciplines in a way that was new to me. But not only disciplines, but you, of course, as an activist, as someone who works on the ground with unions. So you have an experience of praxis, and it was my assumption, my understanding, especially at the end of your text when you were talking about clinical work and you were talking about a separation between research and clinical practice. It almost felt to me that you are calling for a new praxis, a better collaboration and a better merging between clinical work and what you say it's a division, so the research, the academic work. And I thought that was interesting because where I come from, at my university, and although I'm a sociologist, but in the field of design, the capitalist neoliberal managerial universities, they make this other turn, which I think you use in an emancipatory way, and I try as well. But the disciplines usually they say we are educating for the industry, right? We are educating people, for to become members of the industry, and so they basically already say research is what the industry does. Well, you're coming from a different perspective. You're saying, well, these things are divided, but they should become one. How do you see that?
I think that when you talk about clinical work, I came from the health science, but I think it should be think about all activities. Clinical, it means to work with the experience of impossibility of another's. In that way, it's not only about the health science or the health workers, but about to understand the nature of that impossibilities and to make of these impossibilities something greater than a member of the industry.
Yes.
And
Yep.
no, and I think the any activity has as an object, as a sense, the sense of every activity. It's always the other, the other people's, something that is erase it from the conscience of the workers.
Yes.
In general. Now, to take back the possibility of research of doing science, of doing emancipatory science, is a possibility of desalienation of the world, and it's also the possibility of social transformation.
Yeah. Yeah. Suffering is, to me, very new, as in being a lens to look at the world from an emancipatory perspective. And I understand suffering is something that is ontological and that is a fact of life. You are positioning suffering as kind of an absence of possibilities, if I understand you correctly. You need to correct me if you think I'm wrong, but the way I understand...
In a way that suffering is an expression of impossibilities.
Yes.
Life always find impossibilities in the media, in its development. Life always find some kind of impossibility that it needs to resolve. Yes. Every form of life, I'm not talking about just humans. Yeah. Every form of life has to do something with the possibility of its own development. Yeah. But in human society, the resolution of that impossibilities is it's very complex. It's very complex. Principally in the commodity producing society, in the capitalism. Where the meaning of the activities is not is not to cure the suffering. The meaning of activities is to produce value. So the activities that search for the resolution of impossibilities, yes, understand that impossibility in order to produce value. Yes. So only the suffering that suits the product is legitimate. The rest of the impossibilities of the suffering is complaint, is madness, yes, and sometimes, hopefully, is subversion. Yes. That's why I use the example of the LGBTQ movement, yes, as an example of that. No. Yes. You can see the sexual diversity and the gender diversity as a disease. Yes. As it was the case, the sexual diversity was understood as a gender dysphoria, and it has its own codification in the International Disease Classification. Yeah. Until the Stone Riot, until the first movement of the community of sexual diversity, this community starts to build a new understanding, starts to build a new knowledge about what is gender about, and this destroyed the idea of a disease in the sexual diversity. Yes, of course, it gave a new possibility, and started to transform it in the world. That's right. So it created out of a impossibility a possibility, right? And it was able to articulate it. Yeah. One important thing that you are discussing in your work is around capitalist value and how capitalist value operates upon work and clinical activities in particular. Would you be able, please, for the layman, to explain how this works, how this operates?
To understand how capitalist value operates upon the work and clinical activities in particular, we need to identify the ways where use value are interchanged. This is not historically accurate, but useful to understand the inversion of the relation between needs and products. This is something quite complex and is too large to explain it deeply now, but in a society based on the individual needs, the activities and their products are determined by such needs. The social needs include the needs derived from the experience of suffering, commands the social activities. If we look at it closely, every need is satisfied directly by an activity. The excess of production in this kind of society can be changed for other values of use, or changed for social recognition, or in some cultural forms destroyed as in ritual ways, as in potlatch. The development of capitalist society and its process of accumulation by spoliation used that excess to buy the only value of use that, with its use, give you more value, more money. That thing you buy is human work. In order to put people to work, you need to force them to satisfy their needs through work wage and buying commodities. When the creation of value, abstract value, take control over a society, every human need is subsumed under the need of valorization. The commodities through which every need is satisfied respond to that logic of valorization. So the needs respond to production. That's the inversion between needs and activities. That's the involution of creative activities into work. The experience of suffering becomes alienated in the same way. The disease, as an interpretation of that experience in order to cure, plays the role of a connector between a fixed way of interpreting that experience and a package of commodities, pharmaceuticals, surgical, and so on. And on the other hand, the alienated clinical work defines who is able to work and who deserves the benefits of social protection.
I would like to ask you, a bit more about, suffering is a impossibility. So a presence of impossibility, and maintaining the suffering means that there's a situation where a lack of possibilities is being maintained. So I'm interested. So to me, this is beautiful and very powerful. But where does this come from? Tell me, how did you conceptualize suffering as a lack of possibilities? Where does this come from?
Is the impossibility is also ineffable from the individual. No, it's not only impossibility. You actually know something about it. It's more like a feeling of impossibility, and this characteristic of being ineffable for the individual who is suffering is what it made necessary the work of the activities of the social media to resolve it. If you have an impossibility that by your own ways you can resolve, then it's not suffering. You can resolve it, so it's not an impossibility. You asked that, and it's very funny because I start to think about this concept maybe 18 years ago.
Yes.
And my first theoretical reference was Martin Heidegger,
right?
And his book, his principal book, Time and Being.
Yes.
And from that, from him, I start to understand the essential of existentialism. His work will help me very much to understand that nature of the existence. I came from a Marxist family.
Yes.
All my life was about working class and capitalism,
yes.
plus value, but we never talk about the individuals, the experience, the real experience that people go through.
Yes.
It was always like you're working class, you have to fight for revolution.
Yep.
The revolution is for social transformation and a lot of beautiful things, but you never find in this theoretical framework the individuals and his desires and
yes.
The pleasure and the intimacy.
Yeah.
These things. So with Martin Heidegger, I stand to understand this. Then then I discovered a new school of Marxist researchers like Ansel Chape and Moishe Postone. They belong to the Vienna school and the movement of the Crisis magazine.
Right.
And so, well, they work the idea of working class and the idea of value and the work differently, more close to the existent and the real experience of the individuals.
Yes.
And I find this is, is very important, because in the traditional way, the Marxist and communism is seen, you don't have place to pleasure. If you are a militant, if you are a political activist,
Yes.
You have to sacrifice yourself.
Of course, yes.
This is something I hear a lot when I work with union people.
Yeah.
They feel they have to sacrifice for the movement.
Yes.
And if you have to sacrifice for the movement, well, something is wrong.
Yeah.
There's something wrong here. And, in this theoretical framework, there is another researcher who is Agnes Heller. She wrote a beautiful work about the needs, the concept of necessity in Marx.
Yeah.
And she blew my mind, because she said the needs are alienated. We actually are incapable of thinking of new necessities, diverse necessities.
Yeah.
We only can think about the necessities that could be fulfilled by the product the system is producing. No, and that is very interesting. During the COVID pandemics, we work with the people of the industry unions to protect the workers who has risk factors, and we could take them from the factory and keep them at home. So it was, I don't know, about 50, 60 people who stay at home. They continue to get its salary, its wage, and they don't have to do nothing. They just being at home. It was very interesting, because these people actually they didn't know what to do with their time. They stay at home. They feel protected by the unions.
Yeah.
But they start to be very anxious, because they didn't know what to do with their free time.
Yes.
Know what I do.
Yes.
And you start to understand that the possibility of thinking of new things to do, new needs, is quite alienated. No,
Yes.
We are so constrained by the products we can buy in the market,
Yes.
that we cannot think about a new ways to doing things, new things to do, and new things to new needs to develop.
Yes.
Uh,
Yeah, so I think of, what comes to my mind right now, from what you said, and this is a beautiful example of the workers having time finally, but somehow through the alienation of needs, they become anxious because they don't really know what to do with their time. Like I think, imagination is stifled, or is lacking, or is destroyed, especially social imagination. One author comes to my mind, which is Erich Fromm, who comes from the Frankfurt School as well, and he wrote this book, fear from freedom, right? So
Yeah.
so basically that, like, I guess the suffering in that sense, that is on one hand an absence of possibilities, is on the other hand also some sort of safety net, right? Because this is what we know, this is what gives us our routine, this is what gives us the brands that we know, this is what gives us, the technologies, this is the, gives us the submission to authority. So it's to, I guess, to end, would you think that I'm right if I say, in order to liberate ourselves, we need to basically, kind of change a suffering for another suffering, because like, revolution will not happen overnight. So it's a long process. And in that process, it is still an absence of possibilities, unless we reach some state of utopia. So, so it's kind of like suffering is a given and will be a given. It's almost like, like we change one suffering for the other. And do we have are we brave enough, to make a decision that I will not anymore strive to fulfill certain needs, but I will strive to fulfill other needs, which still will mean that I will suffer because they will be unfulfilled.
Yes, because the society we dream about has its own suffering's way.
Yes.
The suffering, it will be always present.
Yes.
The problem is not the suffering itself,
Yeah.
but the ways the social work is organized around this suffering experience in order to fulfill it.
Yes.
But the suffering is I think is super necessary to revolution, it is important to know. I am talking about a union. No?
Yes.
A union is not in its own nature is not a revolutionary movement.
Yeah.
The union represents an institution that in some way negotiate the value of the workforce, as
yes.
The capitalists negotiate the value of the commodities.
Yes.
So it's very hard to work in a union, because the principal target of the union strike is the wage, the money.
Yeah.
And you had to work. If you talk about money, if you talk about the needs that are fulfilled through money,
yeah.
Then you are talking about alienated needs.
Yes.
And it's funny in a way, because in the unions I work, you can find people, with the Che Guevara T-shirts and people super communist, and you find also people from the new ultra-right movements that we have here in Argentina. People who actually vote for this guy.
Yeah.
But they start, but they come along with the struggle of the union and defend the union, but then go to the elections and vote for the for the conservatives, for the
Yes.
right politics.
Yes.
And this is it is not the same. The union is not the same as the other forms, as the feminist movement, of the environmental movement, ecological movements. The unions are very traditional institutions of the capitalism.
Yeah.
So to build another necessity to think about other ways of using the time,
Yeah.
other ways of suffering,
Yeah.
and to fulfill the suffering is quite hard at the interior of these institutions.
Yeah, I feel the same. It's my my experience is the same with the union I'm involved in, the union of the workers in the university sector in Australia. I think what is then crucial is, and that's part of, as you know, that's part of the Memefest theoretical and praxis model to connect with social movements. And you have actually spoken about social movements as well, right? Very explicitly. When you talk about suffering as a provocation, right? For example, and you are explaining how social movements they work in a different way to negotiate what you call the social work around the suffering, by articulating the suffering differently, by imagining it differently, by by speaking about different values, by creating basically different relations in what you call meta-stabilization. So social movements, I think, are really interesting because they're knowledge producers in themselves, and they're rarely seen as such. They're rarely seen as such. And when I look at the unions, the most of the knowledge that I've seen is around industrial issues, but there's often a lack of other types of knowledges. So one would be a radical theoretical knowledge, which I find is often lacking, but another would be a knowledge that comes from social movements. And I wonder, do you have any experience in terms of the unions you work with? Is there any relations to social movements, or any discussion at least that there would be a necessity to connect with social movements? So let's say a suffering, a suffering that is about a unfulfilled possibility to connect with social movements.
Yes, but social movement is something you can find between a union. It's not. We don't talk about the union, social movement as separate things. At the interior of the union, you can find the germs, the seeds of future social movements. I work with the unions of cereal handling, all the industrial process of harvest and of handling cereals.
Yes.
That is something very important in the Argentinian economy.
Yes.
Is one of the first branches of the economy here, and the unions often have the discussion around the ecological impact of their own activities. What are we doing? They say, no. What are we doing with our work? What are we doing with the nature? What are we doing with the river? We have here a very big river, the Paraná River.
Yes.
That is very much contaminated. So they ask these questions in the meetings of the union, and we could work with this interest, and we actually do several activities around the full democracy concept.
Yes.
We make a lot of activities about asking what are we eating, where it come from, what our work has to do with what are we eating, and there are several questions emerging, very basic questions, but this question, I think, expresses a new way of suffering, a suffering different from the suffering of the wage, of the money,
Yes.
of the value of the workforce.
Yes.
And I think they are the seeds of future social movements.
Yes.
That's between the union.
Yes.
And from these questions, we find in the union work, we can later to make contact to other social movements.
Yes.
And start to work together.
Yes.
But to work together, first we have to find this seed in the interior of the unions. We
Yes.
have, in some sense, to provoke these things, no?
Yes.
To provoke this suffering, these questions.
Yes.
I think it's necessary to provoke, no? We don't have to leave the people we work with in a comfortable situation. It seems horrible what I say, but we need to provoke
Yeah.
to curious, no, to make of someone feel fulfilled and comfortable.
Yes, I think that that is certainly a new perspective for me. This healing, caring, the cure. You also said attention is a part of it. Being interested. That this is that this is actually directly related with a critique, with a provocation. So it kind of creates a tension. In that sense, I also understand radical design, and I'd like to go a bit for us to talk about how do we understand design from your perspective of of your thinking, in relation to the concept of suffering and work. Can you perhaps give us a bit of an insight into your ideas? How do you position design, and how do you understand it, and how do you relate it, to work, which is one of the main concepts of that you're using, and suffering?
I understand suffering through. I understand design through a metaphor taken of Immanuel Kant work.
Right. Yep.
No, design as the image, the construction we do of the thing, of the world, of the problem we are working with. The design is not a direct product of an activity, but a way to understand the things, a way through which the eye of the researcher, the eye of the activist, the eye of the worker, could understand the forms and the way the world is functioning. No, how do you understand some situation, some problematic situation? The way you understand that problematic situation implies some kind of design, some kind of image process about how it is working. Not only the product of a designing activity, but a way to understand the things you are working with. And I think that the radicality of the design came from questioning this way we understand the things we are working with.
Yeah.
To questioning this, I say this form, this pre-form, through which we understand the things of the world.
Yeah, you see.
When I talk,
You seem to understand design, I think similarly than I do, as in relational. So, and you basically you basically speak about different modes of relationship that come out of an act of designing, right? And you're speaking about qualitative modifications, in that process. So transformations and design as a ability, to transform themselves and associated environments. So, in that sense, you basically are talking about something that is, for quite a while now. Quite a while. It's recently, it's central to the more cutting edge and progressive discussions within design, and also as positioning design not only in relation to humans, but also in relation to objects or the natural world. And that here I think your interdisciplinarity is extremely important, because you have this knowledge of social and natural sciences and activism, which I think is really, really taking this argument further. And here like I what I really liked was the this unspoken dimension of the suffering. And you say the suffering can be only addressed and resolved, or addressed when it is shared, and you position suffering essentially as a ontological experience that is human, and because of that it is social. Capitalism then prevents us to speak up, and capitalism prevents us to share this experience, or it codifies, it organizes, it dictates,
legitimates certain ways of understanding suffering.
Right. That's right. It legitimates certain ways. What then I liked really very much is when you were saying that, when it's not legitimate, then when we try to speak and when we speak out, then that's a complaint, as one of the things, right? So, and that is really interesting, to think about a society where certain, let's say, certain positions are seen as a critique. And I'll give you an example. I can say the same things in Slovenia and they would be seen as a critique, but I can say the same things in Australia and they're seen as a complaint. Right?
Yeah, it's true. Let me tell you another example. In the medical practice, tell me if you don't experience something like this. When a physician say to you, we already do everything we can, it is impossible, you feel pain.
Right.
This is something very crazy, because the physician is saying to you that it's impossible, you feel pain. And the patient actually feel pain. I don't know what are you thinking about, doctor, but I feel pain.
Yeah.
Not it is impossible, you feel pain.
Yeah.
And I think this funny thing, in some way expresses the idea of the legitimate forms of suffering.
Yes.
In the clinical practice, in the you can find this everywhere. No, it is impossible this happen, but the things happen. So if you can understand the things that are happening, then you have to transform your design framework.
Yeah, that's right.
You need to you have to do some kind of radical work with your design patterns.
That's right. I mean, you need to undiscipline yourself, right?
Yeah. Okay.
You need to undiscipline yourself. So yeah. So I am interested in the following. Right. We have spoken about capitalism and just now about how it legitimizes certain ways of thinking, acting, and talking, speaking about suffering. We also have said that suffering is a given, but some can be emancipatory and some obviously not, and that capitalism reproduces certain types of suffering, or suffering in your thinking comes from needs, and the only legitimate need is the one that relates to value creation, or as value as it is understood and captured by capitalism.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
so I'm you know that I'm very interested in managers, in managerialism, in management, as as this central component of capitalism. And I live in a society that I think in Australia that is deeply, deeply penetrated by managerial culture, by managerial elites, that everyday life is managed. So how can we think about managers, management, managerialism in that perspective of suffering? What is their role? What is their relation to suffering? So we know what capitalism does, but what
yeah.
about them?
Yes. Um, in the public health system that I work here in Argentina,
Yes.
um, you start working with people, attending people,
Yeah.
attending patients, and if you want to develop your profession, you can go through different stages. But the first thing it occurs when when you grow in your profession is you start stopping attending people. You quickly pass to a managerial position. You start to we're talking about gestion here. The only way to develop your profession is to start manage is to become a manager.
Right. So
You cannot grow in your profession with the clinical activities. The clinical activities are seen as something inferior. The first step, something nobody wants to do.
that sounds
Everybody wants
yeah.
to be manager.
Yeah, well, that
No?
sounds to me like the Australian university system.
Yeah, and I always say I don't want to be a manager. I want to keep attending people. That's what I do. That's what I want to do. And if there are any possibility of growth in my profession, I wanted to develop that possibility.
Yeah.
Attending people.
Yeah.
Why I say this? Because I think the managerial system in the health work as in the industrial work as well is an expression and an extreme expression of the division of knowledge and knowing. It's an extreme expression of that. In the industrial work, until a few years ago, the managers of the industry were all engineers, people who came from the academia,
Yeah.
who know what is industrial work about. They were, they study industrial stuff, process, mathematics, and all these things, and they were too much closer to the worker than the people who come after them, who are the managerial people who are extremely separate from the real work that people do in the industry.
Yeah.
So I see this managerialism as an expression of that. It doesn't matter what you are doing in your work. It doesn't matter what is the object of your activities or how you do your activities. The only thing that matters is how much. How much do you produce?
Yeah.
In what time?
Yeah.
What is your productivity?
Yeah.
And in that sense, the managerialism is an expression of the division we told about.
Right. Yeah.
And this have another dimension, that is the communication between the managers and the workers. It become very difficult because they don't have any common point. They have not the same language. They don't talk about the same things. When your boss, your manager, was an engineer and you was a mechanic,
Yeah.
you have point of connection, real points, real problems of the work, of the specific work you do in the industry.
Yeah.
But when the manager has no idea what is you're working about, so the communication, the possibilities of build new things, new relations,
Yeah.
this is quite close.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, what's interesting is that, what you said before, that the way to promote or, to grow or to get formal promotion or whatever is through management positions. And so if I say that, management is mostly, by far in the most cases, is creating suffering of a particular kind, right? That's their job. They're creating suffering of a particular kind, or maintaining suffering of a particular kind.
Yeah,
right.
Of course.
So
yeah.
So on what while we can then see some other types of workers, have the creative and intellectual potential to create a cure to that suffering. For then they're being penalized by the managers, of course. And on one hand, there's more and more people who become managers, and the others are being penalized. So if managers are creating a particular kind of suffering and maintaining it, what is the cure?
I don't know what is the cure, but I think there are two levels to think about this. In the first level, managerialism let you do whatever you are doing. It doesn't matter. You can do whatever you want. Only if what are you doing makes more money.
Yes, that's right.
Okay,
that's right.
In that sense, if nobody in the hospital I work say something to me about my way to work with patients, because I attending a lot of people, so there is no problem with that.
Yeah.
I don't create any contradictions when I work.
Yeah.
But also, when you work in this way, you are exposed to suffering from work. You get accidents. The laboral, the working accidents are quite related with that reality. Laissez-faire. You can do whatever you want. And on the other hand, the other dimension that is connected with this is the managerial system separate people, isolate people in the work.
Yes.
Put people against each other.
Yes.
They don't believe in collective working or or the possibilities of exploiting these collective abilities, but they only isolate people and put people against people in the laboral center, in the industry, in the hospital, in the academics, one against the other. Loneliness and laissez-faire is a terrible combination, because you start to demand to yourself more and more, and you are actually very, very lonely in this. No, it's very is every day is harder to make contact with another.
Of course,
in the workplace.
Of course, It's a highly competitive environment is being produced, right, among the workers, and So absolutely. So So in terms of the cure, we probably, that's a whole cure, to cure what the suffering that management is producing. That's a whole other book, I guess, that we might attend to in the future. But it's highly interesting, in this relation, because if like colonialism, which is such a hot topic these days across the world, and decolonization, and anti-imperialism, and especially decolonization. In design, this is a very hot topic in other disciplines as well, here in Australia, but also in Europe, and certainly in Latin America. Colonialism was always a tool for capitalist expansion, and what's interesting to me is that there is a lot of talking about decolonization, but not a lot about managerialism. But managerialism is what puts.
It's a kind of colonization,
It is a kind of colonization, but these are the soldiers of capitalism, that make it work, and that are soldiers on the ground, to implement it.
There is something invisible in that in that sentence. Managerialism is not a way for the capitalist system to work.
Right.
It's not a way, and I think the value of the collective is important ever to the capitalism. The capitalist system exploit the community of the workers, exploit that relationships. The collaboration. The Marx talk about collaboration. The capitalism has to do with that, to exploit these collective dimensions. And you say something. It's for me. It is very important that we talk a lot about decolonization. We talk a lot about ways to fight against that. But actually, we have to do things. And when I say we have to do things, is we every day find opportunities to decolonize thinkings, to decolonize relationships. When you find some companion at work who is suffering, you don't see he or she well. You discover they are suffering. When you talk about that suffering, when you get close to them and say, "Hey, how are you? Can I help you? Can I do something for you?" From that reality, that that little teeny act you do in your work, this little teeny act it's an act of decolonization. It opened the possibility to another to say, "Oh, I'm not alone here. I feel well when Oliver talked to me, and I can talk with him, and I feel better. I don't feel lonely." And I think this minimal, this little thing you do, is a decolonization act.
I agree with you. I agree with you. And what strikes me is that, in workplace and in general in life, to me now, this perspective of suffering will really constitute a new medium and a new channel to engage with people. And I think that I think is one of the really powerful qualities of your concepts, of your ideas, to provide suffering as this channel, this medium for understanding, for relating, for intervening, for collaborating. Like if I relate to another text in the Radical Intimacies book, which is a conversation between Arturo Escobar and myself.
Yeah.
The design has as a discipline these ideas about what is called participatory design. And that basically is, I think, important for what you just said and for your concepts, because if you think of how you understand design as the ability for living individuals, to transform themselves and their associated environment, design then can be done in many different ways. Advertising also transforms environments, but in a particular way, right? While the idea of participatory design is one where there should be horizontal relationships and collaboration and sharing of values and understanding. And interestingly, some of these concepts of participatory design, to go back again to management, they were invented, they were theorized as from a Marxist perspective when workers in Scandinavia, in Europe, that was in the kind of early 70s, they basically wanted to change the conditions between them and the management. So we have this this idea of what you then extend, and you say, well, the collaboration or design is not just humans, but it's also its objects and non-humans. And that's very important. But I think what is really new is the perspective of suffering.
Another thing I remember from your dialogue with Escobar is Escobar said, we are actually participating all the time.
Yes.
We have necessary relations with the other things in the world. We are actually participating. And when I said we have the opportunity to alleviate, to cure suffering in everyday activities, what I'm saying is, through these actions you do, you can make conscious the idea that the people are actually participating, even if they don't know. No, you are making explicit the participation, the participatory dimension.
Yes.
And we had to think. We have to discuss, but also we have to stop the thinking and make actions, little actions, big actions, whatever.
Yeah.
But make actions, stop the thinking, make actions, and go back to thinking. In a way to that's the way that I think that the possibilities of cure the suffering in the scenario of the managerial system, no? Because we can talk a lot, but in some point we have to do several things, little or bigger things, in order to understand what is happened, and in a way, and because these little activities make it possible for other people to understand they are in a collective, they are participating even if they don't know.
Yeah.
No, I think that the truth should not be said. Always say the truth, but the spirit, so that it expands as evident and as invisible as gravity.
Yeah.
No?
Yeah. Like, I have, maybe two more things that I would like to open, briefly before we end, perhaps. But like, one is if you will continue the work on these concepts, where do you think you would want to go? Like theoretically, philosophically, practically. Where if you would write another chapter or even a longer text, what is it that you think you would want to look into even more?
I'm stopping and going back to the real world, like as I said, and now I'm worried about how to put that questions I made,
Yeah.
how to put that questions in discussion with other people,
Yeah.
especially with my fellows at the hospital. How can I to express these ideas with them? How
Yes.
can I work with them these ideas?
Yes.
But because these are not ideas that only seek for social transformation and all the things we really want, but ideas that make your work healthy for yourself,
Yeah.
that make your work something you can in some way to enjoy. That's something that these are ideas that make you don't suffer
Yeah.
at work.
Yeah.
And I'm really interested in which are the ways to put these questions
Yeah.
into work with others, because are very heavy philosophical ideas, and it is not so easy to talk with other people
course.
about
Yeah.
this. So,
Yeah.
who are the ways to start thinking about this
Yeah.
in the real work
Yeah.
communities?
I think that
Um,
I think that one of the areas that I find are is an area that would really resonate in a way with people that would be able to translate your, as what you said, heavy ideas into something that is more tangible, is basically mental health, or what we call
Yeah.
psychosocial well-being. Here where I live, there is like a massive crisis in Australian universities in terms of psychosocial well-being, but not really much is done systematically. But when I say a massive crisis, it's like epidemic. It's like of like epidemic proportions, and I think that perhaps is something that is an area that people could relate to. In terms of
Yes.
then translating their own position of suffering, and connecting with your ideas, because their suffering explicitly comes from exploitation, from capitalist and managerial exploitation.
Yes. The psychosocial science are very necessary to work with these things.
Yes.
But I was thinking too about the possibility of word, the possibility of language to express that new needs that coming up with the work experience.
Yes.
And in that sense, I think about art,
Yes.
the artistic activities as a dimension important to express the ineffable things the suffering people are going through. No, but because when we work with suffering, we always work with language and in a rational and direct way. And I think we need to learn how to listen beyond the words and thinking about new ways of expressing that suffering. Individual ways, collective ways of expressing that suffering.
Yes.
Because if we want create something new, we need to transform the language,
Yes.
the media, through which we relationate with each other.
Yes. Yes. This brings me, and perhaps we could perhaps finish with that. But this brings me to some of your later work, which you have been sharing with some of the people from Memefest lately. A poem which you wrote, and you titled on communism, with a subtitle "A Logical Poem in 5 Movements," and perhaps if you can tell us a little bit about that, and then when we publish this podcast, perhaps we could publish the poem as well on the website.
When I start to develop these ideas about the emancipatory design of suffering,
Yes.
I wrote a lot of academic papers.
Yes.
And I start to think it doesn't work. The academic paper for these things, it doesn't work. So I start working in poetry, understanding the poetry as a way to force the language to say the things and ineffable in a way. So my question was, how can I express something in a way it doesn't close the ideas, but open the possibilities of thinking and the possibility of thinking and imagination, no?
Yeah.
And I think that the poetry, it's a way to use the language, not only, as I say, the post, not only in a way of beauty. The poetry, it has not to do with beauty itself, but the poetry is a way to open the reality through language, in a way to transform language to say the things are difficult to say directly.
Yes.
And I think communism is a concept we need to transform, to think about it, because nobody knows what is communism about.
Right.
We don't know the shape, the form of the society of the future. We don't know how. We just know we don't want this. We don't want this kind of society. We don't want this kind of relationship, but we don't know how the future is.
Yes.
So the poetry is a way to express that possibility when the language is constrained, but the actual social relations. Yes. I think the poetry is a very interesting way to think the future and to think the today, and you don't need to be a writer to write poetry.
Yeah.
I think everyone has the ability to write poetry in order to express an idea it cannot totally understand.
Yeah. Well, on this note, that's, I think, a very beautiful ending of our conversation. Mariano, I would like to thank you, my friend.
Thank you, Oliver.
It was a pleasure.
I enjoyed very much, dude.
Yes, me too. And I know, there will be a time where we will do this in person, somewhere in the world.
Yes, please.
We will do it. Thank you, and we will talk soon. Bye. Thank you for listening. This podcast is a production of Memefest and Intellect, publisher of Original Thinking. It is a celebration of our collaboration and Intellect's 40th anniversary. The podcast is produced in Naarm, also known by its colonial name Melbourne. We would like to pay our respects to elders, past, present, and emerging. Sovereignty was never ceded. The music at the start and end of each episode is by the band Bait from Buna in Victoria, with members Michael McGuinness and Malachi Doyle. You can find them on Bandcamp. Check them out. Thanks. Until our next episode, take care.